In this video, I'm going to look at a VUE app that has radio buttons. I'm going to do sort of two versions to start off with. The first one, I'm going to have the radio buttons all explicitly written out in the HTML with some view parts, and then in the second one, the radio buttons will be more dynamically generated using a V4. So there'll be a set of them, and I'll sort of loop over that. I'll have some array and then possibilities, and I will loop over that array to generate the radio buttons. But here's version 1, the simpler version, and the code for this can be found at the URLs seen here. And it looks like this. We have a set of choices, sizes, and the user can pick one, and then that size, the value of that size, which is an abbreviation, gets shown below. Okay, so most of the work is going to be in the HTML here, so let's have a quick peek at the CSS. Some body styling, some input styling. Here's some styling of the input of the radio type that is checked, that has a label adjacent to it. So this is the change of the style of the label next to the checked radio button. That was here. And here is making the labels of a fixed size. So that was the styling. Okay, the JS, there's not much to the JS here. It is mostly, I have one property within my data, which is the user size, which starts off as quote, quote, so I don't have a size when I start. And then almost everything else is here. It's in the HTML. I have a link to the VUE CDN. I have a link to my style sheet. I have a title. I am in the body. I have a header. Now this does connect back to the JS. This is the part of the page to which VUE will be applied. And that is here in this last line over in VUE. I had some code that was turned into a VUE app. This size code was turned into a VUE app and then mounted onto the element with an ID of VUE Radio. And there it was. So this just says I'm going to have VUE over here, and there's going to be a variable called user_size. And then I have this sort of more or less hard-coded set of radio buttons. So here's an input of type radio. I'm having labels and radio buttons work as a team, meaning that I can check on the radio button or I can check on the label. And to achieve that, I have the radio button gets an ID and the label gets a for property, and they match. That teams them up. The name is a property of radio buttons and allows the user to choose only one of the choices. So that is that one in the beginning, there's none. And then once one is chosen, there's always one and only one chosen. After it starts off with 0 chosen, then once I choose one, it's always just one that is chosen. That comes from the name property. So all of these radio buttons will have the same name. The value is sort of what we work with behind the scenes, and it becomes the value of the selected radio button is what gets pulled into the variable user size. So that's what comes next. The V model. This is the very view part of it. The V model connected us back to this property in data called user size. So we're saying that V model, the value of the radio button, if it happens to be the checked one, will give its value over to the user size property. And then the user way down at the bottom, it is the user size property that is displayed at the bottom of the page. So that was, again, the radio button input of type radio with an ID. They all have the same name, they have different values, and they all have the same V model. That all of these radio buttons connect to the user size. Only one of them will be chosen, and that's the one that will give its value to the user size. Then here's the label. The 4 of the label matches the ID of the radio button, and then we have words between the open label and the closed label. That is not what we work with. We work with the value, but so what the user is, what we work with behind the scenes and what the user sees are two different things. And then I just have a bunch of them: extra small, small, medium, large, extra large, extra, extra large, and then down here finally a span still within the div to which I am mounting the view, and that within that span I have this curly user underscore size, and that displays the user size here of the checked radio button. Okay, so that was the simple version, pretty much like the almost hard-coded, individually hard-coded radio buttons with just a little bit of VUE, but that gave us, I mean, it's a little bit of VUE, but VUE gives us a lot for a little, in that I didn't have to track down any events. I didn't have to say when this is checked, do something. That happened automatically. Okay, now I want to show you version 2, which is a little bit more dynamic, but it looks the same for the most part. Let me close all of the old. And now here's the dynamic one. The styling is more or less the same. Let me open it and show that it closed. That was the simple. Let me open with a live server. The new one, it looks like I'm styling it slightly differently, or I have things bolded or something, but it's more or less does the same thing, the same functionality. But these are going to be generated more dynamically. And I'll show you what I mean. Okay. And the code for this one is here. View, my site, this particular set of things are under C343WKS, and then this zipped up file. Okay. Still connect to the CDN. Still have a title, still connect to the CSS. So that's the CSS had a body input label, a label that is adjacent to the checked radio button, same as we saw before. There's a little bit more in the JS in this case. I have not just the variable user size, which is the value selected by the user, but I have all of the possible sizes in an array of objects. So my data, using a sort of JSON notation, is my data is an object. It has a property user size. It has another property sizes, and then that property sizes is an array of objects, and those objects have two properties: size name and size abbreviation. And then down here, I do a little pre-selecting, in that mounted is one of the sort of predefined methods that come with VUE, and I'm saying that the user size I'm going to set to the small, so that there will never be a choice, that there will never be an unchosen radio button. There will always be one chosen, because I am choosing it in the mount. Whereas in the previous version, they were all unselected, unchecked until I clicked on the first one. Okay, so this is my pre-selecting of the small. And I'm setting the size equal to the abbreviation. So we will see that I'll be using the abbreviation for the values of the radio buttons, so that using this assignment statement here will make sense. Okay. So here we are over in the back to the HTML. We had the CDN. We had the link to the style. We have the region, a div in my case, to which we will be mounting the view that was at this very bottom line here. I'm taking the code above size. I'm creating an app from it in Vue and then mounting that to the element with an ID of VUE Radio. And then here is I have a span. That span has a V4. So I am, that is a repetition structure in Vue. We showed an array of sizes. So I am looping over an array. So a size will be the name of the element of the array for one iteration. Then I'm going to construct a radio input label pair for each element in my array. So here's my input. It is of type radio. Then we have this, anything that's going to be sort of variable, anything that's going to be changing, we are going to do what's called a binding. So the attribute, I'm making an attribute which is an ID, and an ID should all be different for each radio button. And so that has to change. And so I do a colon ID. And there's sort of a longer version of this. I think you say vbind colon ID, but the colon is enough. So it's implied that it's like, that it's going to be a vbind or vbound or whatever the right syntax is. Okay, so this is telling me that I have an attribute that is dynamic, that is changing, that is varying within the loop. And it is my element, but particularly the name. I'm using the name. I could have used the abbreviation. That would have worked just as well, so long as they're all different. I gave them all the same name, because that's what makes the radio buttons act as a group, and then I can only choose one. So that is not varying. So there is no binding there. So there is no colon there. The value is changing, and I'm using for the value the abbreviation of the element. So the element is an object. It had a size name and a size abbreviation. I used so far one of them for the ID, the other one for the value. And the things that are changing, we have this colon in front of them, and they are let's call them V binding. And then there is the model. So in there's a single choice. So we had, again, in the data, there was the single choice, what the user chose, and then the possible choices. So the V model connects to the user underscore size, and that's, again, the same for all of them. So all of the radio buttons are connected to the user underscore size property, and whichever one is checked, it gives its value over to the user underscore size property. Here's my label. Again, to get a radio button and a label to work together as a team, the ID of the radio button must match the for property of the label. And so here it is. I'm using a size.size underscore name for both of them. So that ID and that for match. Then between the open label and the closed label, I'm using the size name. So that's what the user sees. The user sees the name spelled out. And I'm giving myself a break. So each one is on its own line. And then when that's all done, I am displaying the user underscore size and connecting to the script that we saw on the other side. So that was what I wanted to show you in this video. Two versions of working with the radio buttons. One where each individual radio button sort of, I'll say, hard-coded. And here where we have a set of radio buttons sort of dynamically generated from an array of possibilities. So the data had a property that was an array of objects, and from that array of objects, we have made a set of radio buttons and corresponding labels. Okay, that's all I wanted to show you. Thanks for your